I remember it like it was yesterday, my father and I, riding down New York State Route 141, somewhere around Westchester County. He was a delivery man for a small furniture business run out of our hometown, Brooklyn, New York. That morning, his boss, Mr. Albertson, had come by very early to dump a last-minute job on him. My father, still drunk from the night before, tried to put him off, but the old, wry-faced codger made it very clear that it wasn't a request. "Marvin's got a baseball game today," my father explained. "He could really make it in the big leagues one day, Mr. Albertson. I can't ask him to drop everything, last minute. How am I supposed to get this thing through someone's front door by myself?" Marvin was my older brother. He dropped out of high school when he was 15 and started working with our father to help keep food on the table. He was 19 at that point. He'd usually spend his weekends playing baseball down at the park in the neighborhood league. One day, not a week prior, he was approached by a minor league recruiter. My father was over the moon. If he performed well in his game that day, it could be the start of an actual career as a ball player. "You're going to deliver this china cabinet today, Mickey, or you'll be looking for work somewhere else." It's as simple as that. It was no secret that my father was a drinker and a gambler. It would have been a hard secret to keep anyway, since he always smelled of whiskey. He ran with a rough crowd, rarely ever coming home before I was in bed for the night. Mr. Albertson knew all this, and probably felt justified giving my dad a hard time because of it, but the man was a pompous blowhard. I'm sure he felt powerful having the fundamental necessities another man needed in the palm of his hand, able to threaten their withdrawal on a whim. When I was little, I remembered there being a clear-cut line between the good guys and bad guys, but the older I got, the more apparent it was that that line was drawn on a beach during a hurricane. Good guys and bad guys were for comic books. Real people were usually a little bit of both. "Marion!" Dad shouted over his shoulder. I was sitting quietly on the sofa, reading Ray Bradbury. You see, my father had rigid ideas about what a man was supposed to be, and I wasn't quite up to snuff. He and my brother were both about 5'11". They both had large feet and large hands. They had chest hair, they drank dark liquor, they cussed, and they spit. I had often wondered if I was the milkman's kid, since I was no taller than my mother, at 5'4". I shared her small frame, her wide hips, and her soft freckled complexion. Strangely, unlike anyone else in my household, I was graced with wavy auburn locks. Everyone else in my family had the darkest hair on the block, black as the night. When we went anywhere together, I stuck out like a sore thumb. When pressed about it, my mother would go on about her great-grandfather's bright orange curls, but I wasn't sure I believed her. I don't think my father did either. "Put that book down, and get your ass over here. It's time for you to step up." I remember, this one time, when I was a small child, he took me outside to play catch with him and my brother. Now, don't get me wrong, I love the game. It's America's pastime after all. Like everyone else in my neighborhood, if the Dodgers were playing, I was right there beside the radio. However, that love didn't translate to skill. He tossed the ball across the sidewalk to my brother, who turned to face me, eagerly awaiting his throw. He tossed it underhand, the ball arching across the sky. I threw up my glove, but as the ball got closer, I winced and closed my eyes, turning my head away. Ironically, my instinctual attempt at protecting myself left my face wide open, and my right eye was much less effective at catching a baseball than the glove would have been. Tears flowed down my cheeks when my brother led me inside, apologizing for something that wasn't really his fault. My mother grabbed some peas from the icebox for the swelling, but I had that shiner for 2 weeks after that. My father stayed on the porch for the rest of the day, bottle in hand. Mom sent me out to get him for dinner, but he never set eyes on me. He just said, I should never have let her give you that sissy name. I don't think he ever looked at me the same again. The day we made that delivery was the first time he'd ever conscripted me to do any kind of work. I was actually kind of excited. It felt like an opportunity to prove myself to him. Usually I was relegated to helping my mom with dinner, while he and Marvin chopped wood for the furnace. Most of my chores and responsibilities were indoors. I didn't mind the actual work, but I hated the derision I saw in his eyes when I set the table. Now, I was sitting shotgun, wearing the shiny new work boots I'd never had an occasion to wear before, and we were making the journey upstate. We arrived at a nice house, with the biggest yard I'd ever seen. The driveway had 2 entrances that looped around. Once he parked, he hopped out with his clipboard and rang the doorbell while I waited by the tailgate of his truck. The lady of the house signed some papers, and we started unloading the furniture. He sent me up on the truck bed and had me untie the rope. I eagerly complied, hoping to appear as an experienced laborer to the woman. Those hopes were dashed when it came time to move the piece. I pushed the cabinet to the end of the tailgate where my father was waiting, ready to lift the end. I jumped down to the ground and started to lift my half off, but I had a hard time getting a good grip, and the edges dug painfully into the palms of my hands. When I raised it up, I could barely hang on to it. Try as I might, the pain was unbearable, and without having ever made a decision to do so, I released the walnut tighten, and it fell straight to the ground. The glass doors, the mirror in the back, and the built-in lighting fixture all shattered, spraying glass in every direction. A small shard cut the woman's ankle, leaving her bleeding in her driveway, and her furniture destroyed. To say she was furious would be an understatement. She screamed, "I don't know what kind of incompetent operation you're running here, but you can be sure Mr. Albertson will be hearing about this. Get out now." Through tears, I pleaded, "Ma'am, just let me clean this mess up first," but to no avail. She just said, "Get out," and pointed to the road, teeming with rage. My father didn't say a word. He just removed his keys from his pocket and got in the truck. I jumped in the passenger seat and started begging his forgiveness, swearing to do better next time. Still, not one word was uttered. We pulled into a liquor store where he got out, walked in, walked back out, and started driving, brown bag in hand. He opened the bottle and drank the entire thing before we were a mile down the road. I fixed my gaze to his face, looking for any sign of what was to come. His expression remained unchanged all the way to the 2-lane highway. A few miles down the road, there were woods on both sides of the road, not much else around. He put his foot all the way on the gas, and my father's mouth moved suddenly, but no sound came out. Then, I saw a single tear flow down his cheek. He quietly said the words, "Fuck it all," and the last thing I remember after that was his eyes closing and the truck flipping over. I woke up in the hospital 2 weeks later. The first thing I noticed was that I was covered in bandages from head to toe, and couldn't move anything besides my eyes. I looked to the left, and saw my mother asleep in the chair beside me. I couldn't see anything else but barren hospital walls. A doctor came in and held a small flashlight to my eyes, flipping it on and off. He seemed pleased with whatever he saw, and asked me, "Do you know where you are?" Blink twice for yes. I tried to say no, but the sound was muffled, and I felt a pain in my jaw. He noticed the discomfort in my eyes, and said, "Sorry about that. I'm sure that didn't feel great. You were in a very bad car accident. You're in a hospital in Pleasantville." Just then, probably because of the noise, my mother roused from her slumber. "Oh my God, baby, I thought I lost you," she cried, kissing me on the head over and over again. She tried to give me a hug, but my cries of pain and the doctor dissuaded her. "That's enough, Mrs. Ryan. I know you're happy your son is alive, but he's in a lot of pain right now. You can hug him all you want when we get him good and healthy again." She sat back down and listened while the doctor continued explaining to me exactly what was going on. "You've sustained quite a few injuries, but the prognosis is good. With enough time and patience on your part, you should be able to make a full recovery. I have to warn you though, you've sustained several injuries. You have a fractured femur, a fractured growth plate in your wrist, you've got a few broken fingers on both hands, some hairline fractures in several places on both arms, and the biggest issue is going to be the 3 separate fractures in your pelvis. That's going to take quite a bit of physical therapy. We've also got you in a neck stabilizer, but that's precautionary. We need to make sure there's nothing wrong with your spine first, since you can't move now. If everything looks good after some tests tomorrow, we'll take that off, and you'll probably be able to sleep better. Aside from that, you've got a broken jaw, nose, and orbital socket. We had to put in some hardware to allow everything to heal, so your jaw will be wired shut for a couple of months, and we put a couple of plates in your cheeks since your face was basically caving in on itself. We've got the best plastic surgeons in the country coming in for a consultation, and when they're finished, no one will be able to tell anything was ever wrong in the first place. There may be some discoloration where they have to do skin grafts, but we won't know until we get there. This would be extremely hard for anyone, but you're going to have to stay strong until we get to the end. You can have a normal life again, but it's going to be a long journey. I'll give you the room, so you and your mother can talk. We'll go over the treatment plan more in detail tomorrow. Get some rest tonight, doctor's orders." He had said that my mom and I could talk, but really I'd just be listening. Even if I could have talked, I wouldn't have known what to say. I was confused and terrified. The events leading up to the crash were fuzzy, but over time they would come back to me. At that moment though, all I could remember was my father's tears. My mother picked up my hand and put it in hers. I could see my green eyes peeping through the bandages reflected in her glasses. She was trying her best not to cry, but it was obviously a struggle for her. She said, "Honey, I'm sorry, but your father didn't make it. He was already dead when the ambulance got there. The police found an empty bottle near the crash site, but they couldn't prove it was his, so the life insurance claim will be paid. You don't need to worry about our finances, okay? You don't need to worry about anything at all except getting better. We're going to get you healthy. I'm sure your father was drunk. He should have never been driving with you like that. He knew better. God, I love you so much. I just need you to know it was not your fault." She kissed me on the forehead again and held my hand for the next 3 hours, while I drifted in and out of consciousness. It was easy for her to say it wasn't my fault, but from what I could remember, I felt like it was. I wanted to break down, but the pain wouldn't allow it. The next day, the doctor returned with a physical therapist. For a few hours, they performed several tests. They stroked my skin in different places to see if I experienced any sensation. They moved my limbs around to test my range of motion. They had me attempt to wiggle my digits to test my ability to control my body. When all was said and done, they didn't replace the neck stabilizer, and I was incredibly grateful. Some physical therapists came back every day from then on, and the routine repeated, becoming more difficult each time. A week later, I saw the plastic surgeon for the first time. He didn't offer much of an explanation of the procedures he'd be performing. I can only assume that was for my benefit. I've done a small amount of research since then, and I'd assume most people don't want to think about another person removing their face before they go to work on their skull with a drill. When the operation was completed, he was pleased with the results, but we'd have to wait a few months before the bandages were removed. The laundry list of procedures and therapies I endured were physically taxing and at times extremely painful, though in a way, they were preferable to the eternal boredom that was the rest of my existence. Marvin visited me every few days for the first few months. He was jovial every time, but I could see the stress in his expression. My father was gone, and the weight of supporting our family now fell onto him. He came in one day with amazing news. He had received an offer from a minor league team down in North Carolina. He finally had an opportunity for an actual career in baseball. On top of that, he'd be able to send Mom some help every month. The minors weren't going to make him rich, but it was a necessary stepping stone to achieving his dream. He left the week before they unwired my jaw. I didn't get to tell him that I was happy for him and proud to call him my brother, but I think he knew. When the wiring did come off, the first thing I did was tell my mom just how much I loved her. The second thing I did was ask for a nice big cheeseburger. After the first bite, I was nearly full. A few minutes later, I was nauseous. Apparently, that was a common occurrence for people who hadn't had solid food in a while. It would be another month before I'd eat anything close to a full meal. 2 months passed, and it was time to remove the bandages from my face. The anticipation was palpable as the doctor unwound the smelly wrappings. I stared into the mirror, imagining spending the rest of my life as the Elephant Man, and everything that would entail. Seeing my face for the first time, my mother dropped to her knees then and there, and thanked God for the blessing. In the mirror, I could see that I still kind of looked like me, but things were a little different. My jawline seemed rounder, my cheeks seemed to have a plump quality that they didn't have before, and my nose was much smaller. The skin grafts seemed to have taken well, and were only really noticeable if you knew what you were looking for. All in all, it was the best result we could have hoped for. I still looked like I'd gotten into a fight with a Mack truck and lost, but time would heal these wounds. I just needed a little more patience. A few days later, the doctor paid me another visit, bearing good news. "Mr. Ryan, it looks like it's time for us to let you go home. We've done everything we can here, and you're healing up very well. We're going to remove most of your stabilizers, but we will have to keep the pelvic cast on for a few more months. We're transferring your care down to Brooklyn, where you'll have to keep up with physical therapy for a while, but I'm confident that this time next year, you'll be running laps around the neighborhood again." Mom was the happiest I'd seen her in months. She said, "Marion was never really the kind of boy to run laps around anything. He's my little professor. It'll be nice to see him outside of visiting hours, though." The doctor pushed his glasses up and said, "Well, whatever the case, we'll have him discharged tomorrow. Do you have transportation worked out?" "Yes, my friend, Magda, will be picking us up, and we'll make the trip back down tomorrow. We're fortunate enough to be staying with someone who owns a car in the city." With my brother gone, and me in the hospital, my mother had decided it was time to scale down. The insurance payout was substantial, but so were my hospital bills. She was extremely frugal dealing with my father's funeral. He didn't have many friends, so a large service wasn't necessary. I didn't attend, but was later told that he was buried in what basically amounted to a pine box. When I later visited his grave, there was a modest headstone, with his name, his date of birth, and his date of passing. I'm surprised at how long it took me to realize there was no room for anyone else to be buried beside him. Even with the economical funeral service, the well was running dry, so my mom sold a lot of our things and moved into a 3-bedroom apartment in Williamsburg with the Kowalskis. Magda Kowalski, her husband, and her 2-year-old daughter emigrated a few months before the Nazis invaded Poland. They moved into our neighborhood, Bushwick, where Magda and my mother became fast friends. They too couldn't seem to get enough of each other, always finding excuses to get together during the day while our fathers were at work. I vaguely remember the first time I played with Ella, their daughter. The kind of faint memory that you have of childhood, that's nothing but a few faint details. She didn't speak any English, not that it mattered too much at that age, but we were inseparable from then on. Sometimes, she can be very annoying and absurdly pushy, but she was my best friend, the kind you can't replace. Mr. Kowalski had been long gone for a few years before the accident. It was a tale as old as time. Dad ran out of cigarettes, so he left for the bodega, and just never came back. I never heard Magda speak of him again. Ella told me, however, that she thought he probably left with another woman. Whatever the case, he was gone, and life went on without him. When we arrived at the new apartment, the first issue we ran into was the stairs. Ella, being her usual exuberant self, knocked on every door in the building until she was able to find two strong men willing to carry me, and my wheelchair to the walk-up. Magda thanked them with baked goods. Inside, my mother had set up my bed in the living room. She thought getting up and down the narrow hallways would be too much of a challenge for me. I didn't mind. The television was there with me after all. Mom and Magda said they'd be sharing a bedroom, so Ella and I could have our own. My empty room was in the back of the apartment, waiting for me to heal. Over the next several days, a new routine was established. Mom would wake up early and help me deal with my morning toilet. After I gave myself a sponge bath, I'd change into a fresh nightshirt, and we'd go back to the living room. Ella would get up and take over the bathroom while Mom cooked breakfast for us. I would take my meal where I lay, obviously, on a bed tray, and Ella would join me with a TV tray while we watched the morning news together. When we finished, Ella would clean the kitchen while Mom got herself ready, and then she'd be out the door to school. Mom, without fail, would kiss me on the forehead and make her way to work. Before she married my father, she was a seamstress. She actually met my father while working backstage at a Broadway theater when he was making a delivery one day. Now, she was back at it, having acquired a position with the new production of Peter Pan. After they left, I'd normally be on my own for a few hours until Magda arrived. Magda worked as an emergency room nurse, and was usually out of the door long before the rest of us awoke. She'd get home shortly after noon, and prepare lunch for the two of us while we chatted. Then she'd watch her stories. At the time, I feigned disinterest, but secretly, I found the plots compelling, and only turned my eyes from the screen and back to my books just before the commercials. Not too long after that, Ella would return, carrying a backpack filled with her homework, and whatever she brought me to read from the library. After my mom came home, we'd all eat dinner together. I'm glad they invented the TV tray, because at that point, I'd take all the human contact I could get. Some people might think the worst part about recovering from serious injury is the pain. Others might think it's the hours of exhausting physical therapy. Don't get me wrong. It's extremely hard learning to perform the most basic of functions all over again, only with a body significantly less cooperative than it was the first time around. In fact, all of it was hard, but worst of all, dealing with that much boredom was nearly impossible. I must have read every book I owned 3 times. I read every book Ella brought me from the library. I read all of the magazines Ella left around. I finished 24 jigsaw puzzles. I wrote my brother a letter every week. I read the entire newspaper every day. I did the exercises just as my physical therapist instructed. I watch a lot of television. I caught every baseball game. I even listened to Ella drone on about whatever was happening with her and her friends at school that day. Even with all those activities, I still spent so much more time staring at the wall and dreaming of the day I could negotiate the stairs by myself, just to go out for a walk. The weekly PT visits were hard and took a lot out of me, but it was a blessing to see anything besides the same 4 walls, day in and day out. This routing went on for months, with little variance. One afternoon, Ella, having just returned from school, was sitting beside my bed, as she usually did. That day, however, she'd chipped a nail, so while we conversed, she filed away the damage and repainted her nails. "What do you think?" she asked cheerfully. She fanned out her hand and showed off her fingertips, glistening with smooth, clear polish. I said, "They look great, especially compared to mine." I held out my hand for comparison, laughing over the difference. It's hard to find a reason to keep up with grooming rituals when you're not really going anywhere, and no one is coming to see you. My nails had grown quite long, especially for a boy, though they were far from the neatly manicured talons of Ella. They were uneven and rough, regularly snagging on my bed sheets. She responded, "That won't do," and proceeded to file away at my digits, not thinking to ask for permission. I didn't say anything. I just watched her expertly shape them into something neat and presentable. I did protest when she applied a coat of clear polish, but she assured me, "No one is going to see you anyway, and it will help keep your cuticles from fraying. Be quiet and let me have my fun." From then on, nail care became a regular part of our weekly ritual. When the accident occurred, I was already a month overdue for a haircut. Times were tight then, so we tended to push those kinds of things off for as long as possible. Since I usually wore my hair in a longer greaser style, by then my bangs were hanging down to my nose. 7 months later, they were down to my chin, the rest not far behind. I was blessed with a double crown, so my hair grew forward and was constantly in my face. It was a Saturday afternoon when I finally experienced some relief. I'd spent the morning swatting away at it, like a mule swatting away the flies with its tail. Magda had had enough, and in a huff, went to her and my mother's bedroom, and returned with a handful of bobby pins. When she'd finished with me, my hair was parted on the side, and pulled back behind my ears. I feared I looked a fool, but after she brought me a mirror, nothing looked that strange. It was the best Band-Aid solution anyone could come up with until I could get to a barber. After that, Ella would help me pin my hair up every morning before she left. Summer was a welcome change, since Ella was home every day with me. Slowly, but inevitably, time marched on, and I began to show progress. It started by being able to stand on my own 2 legs again, without the assistance of anyone or anything. Small steps followed, and from there bigger and bigger steps. Not too much later, I was making my way around the apartment on my own. The adults were insistent that I not try to help with the dishes, or anything, but being able to go to the bathroom by myself, or fix myself a glass of water was a big help to not only me, but everyone else as well. Not too long after that, I was as mobile and pain-free as I ever was. The only impediment left was that god-awful cast. The day the doctor told me I'd be getting the pelvic cast off, I nearly cried. It had been so long since I wore trousers, I'd nearly forgotten what they felt like. An appointment was set for Saturday morning at the hospital. They had some kind of vibrating saw that would cut through the plaster, but not the skin. Needless to say, I was ecstatic. When we got home, I spent a lot of time in the bathroom mirror, thinking about everything that had led me to this point. I was so happy about removing the cast, that for the first time since, I'd forgotten the tragedy that caused it in the first place. In the mirror, I barely recognized myself. It was still me, but my features were much softer. The swelling had passed, and the bruising with it, but my cheeks remained swollen, as did my upper lip. Before I had a pretty pronounced pout, but now top and bottom seemed to match perfectly. The angles of my jaw were much softer, and the little dip in the tip of my nose was long gone, not to mention just how much smaller said nose seemed to be. It truly wasn't that different, but the large slope that plagued my mom's family was long gone. Ella said my new nose was cute, but that wasn't as reassuring as she'd hoped. The Friday before my big day, I was awake before Mom and Ella. I tried to get a jump on things when I heard Mom resting, so I started my morning routine. I assumed she'd bring me a new nightshirt any minute, but for the first time since returning to New York City, it didn't happen. Even more surprising was hearing her shout, "Shit," from across the house. Nancy Ryan was not the type to swear, so whatever had her upset must have been pretty bad. She came down the hallway and knocked on the bathroom door when I was brushing my teeth. Through the door she shouted, "Honey, I've made a terrible mistake, and I'm very sorry." "What's wrong, Mom?" I asked, assuming she'd burned breakfast or something. She replied, "I forgot to add your laundry to the bin, so when Magda went to the laundromat yesterday, none of your things were washed." I was confused. "What does that mean for me then?" "Well, you don't have any clean nightshirts to wear." I've been trying to find an adequate substitute, but really there's just one thing I can find that will work. She cracked the bathroom door and offered a bundle of cloth. I held it under the light and realized it was a soft nylon material in a shade of mint green. I held it up and let the ends fall to the floor, realizing then why Mom was being so apologetic. It was one of Ella's nightgowns. I dropped it on the floor like it was made of fire ants and shouted, "You can't seriously expect me to wear this." "I don't care for your tone, Marion," she said, chastising me, before continuing, "It's just for today. Tomorrow, we'll cover you with a blanket when we go to the hospital, and you can change into pants before we leave. It'll be fine. I'm running late for work already, so I just need you to swallow your pride for one day. Could you please do that for me?" Her words seemed like a question, but her tone made it clear that it was a command, and I knew better than to argue. I didn't say a word. I just put the flimsy garment on and stepped out of the bathroom, my face as crimson as wine. "That wasn't so bad," she said, but I was inclined to disagree. I moped back to the bed and crawled under the covers. Not long after that, Mom ran out, half-dressed, still carrying her gloves and hat. The slamming door must have roused Ella, who came through the living room while heading to the kitchen for her morning coffee. She yawned "good morning" and continued with her routine. Once I heard the percolator going, she poked her head back around the doorway with the biggest grin I'd seen her with since I'd moved in. "Is that mine?" she asked, already knowing the answer. I hung my head in embarrassment and muttered, "Mom forgot my laundry, so she made me wear this instead." "Well, I must say, you look great." "Wait here, just 1 second." She hurried to her bedroom and came back holding something behind her back. "Close your eyes for me." I obliged and felt her pulling my hair back as she normally did. When I opened them again, she was holding a mirror to my face, and I could see instead of bobby pins, she'd used a large, white Alice band to pull back my locks. My hair fell down to the back of my neck at this point, so the accessory didn't look out of place. If anything, I was kind of pretty. I started to reach for the offending fabric band, but Ella grabbed my hands and looked at me pleadingly. She pouted, "Don't take it down yet, please. Let me have this for a little bit. You're just so pretty." "I won't tell anyone, I swear." She offered her pinky, and after a moment of hesitation, I raised mine, and as we had 1,000 times before, we locked them and kissed the knuckles of our thumbs. This was a sacred, unbreakable bond to us, so I felt somewhat reassured. Good. I'm going to get dressed and run down to the bodega. Do you want anything? I shook my head no, and in a flash, she was dressed and gone. I was by myself for around 30 minutes, while awaiting her return. I tried to pick up a book and start reading several times, but over and over, I was drawn back to the mirror. I examined my reflection from every angle. My new face suited the get-up, that was for sure. It was kind of amusing. I found myself playfully flirting with my reflection, batting my eyelashes suggestively, and blowing myself kisses. When I heard the deadbolt turn, I couldn't drop the mirror fast enough though. Ella had returned, and she was carrying a few shopping bags and 2 bottles of pop. She handed me one of them and retrieved a bottle opener from the kitchen. After she opened our drinks, she said, "I've got a surprise for you." I went a little further down the road to the Connolly's butcher shop. So, they live upstairs. Their daughter, Eileen, was home, and we had a chat. You know, she's got that same Celtic mane as you. Anyway, I borrowed something. Ella opened her purse and pulled out a long, thick strand of red hair. "You told me you wouldn't tell anybody," I said, getting upset. I didn't, she replied gleefully, holding the hairpiece up to my own strands and comparing the color. "I just told her I needed it since a friend was thinking of trying a new style. It's just about perfect, I'd say. Now, sit still while I have my way with you." I playfully swatted at her, but in the end, she brushed my hair back and tied it high on my head, pinning the flyaways down. She added the hairpiece over the top of the little pullback nub, and when all was said and done, I had a flirty ponytail, not dissimilar to those worn by many other teenage girls at the time. She tied off the top with a big white ribbon, and I quickly returned to the mirror to examine the results. The color really wasn't that different at all. I hardly looked like myself at this point, and not an ounce of maleness was detectable in my reflection. Ella didn't even bother to ask before starting our nail routine. This time, she just filed down the rough spots, but left them close to the same length. She reached for the shopping bag and came back with a brand new bottle of bright red nail polish, saying, "I've been saving my allowance for a while, so I thought it was time to treat myself." Instinctively, I pulled my hand away, but her puppy dog eyes quelled the fight before it even started this time, and when she was finished, I was sitting with my fingers splayed, each sporting a bright red nail, manicured to perfection. When they dried, Ella begged me to do hers for her. It occurred to me that she'd spent the last year neglecting most of her female friendships to help take care of me, so I relented. Her nails obviously weren't as neat or as smooth as mine, but I did a reasonable job, and I think she was happy just to share the ritual with another person. We were so engrossed that neither of us noticed the apartment door that Ella, in her mischievous excitement, had mistakenly left cracked open. We didn't hear footsteps coming up the stairs either. We did, however, hear the knocking that inadvertently swung the door open wide. The boy standing there with his arm raised looked as terrified as we did. In retrospect, it was pretty funny, but at the time, I wanted the earth to open up and swallow the apartment building whole. Instinctively, he held his hand over his eyes, saying, "Ladies, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize the door was open. My mom is always telling me to pay more attention to what I'm doing. God, I'm so stupid." He started swatting himself on the head, admonishing himself, when Ella got up from the bed and walked over to him. "Archie Connolly, you're not stupid," she said, gently taking his hand, preventing him from striking himself again. "It was an honest mistake. If anything, it's all my fault for not closing the door all the way. What are you doing here?" The red-haired boy removed his hand from his eyes, but he still blushed like he'd stumbled into the girls' locker room at school. "I got home a little bit after you left, I guess, and you left your coin purse, so my mom sent me after you to bring it. I almost ran straight to your old place too, but fortunately my mom caught me before I took off. Your mom's got a credit account with us, so we had your new address on file." "I don't know how new it is," Ella said, batting her eyelashes at the sheepish boy. "We've been here for about a year now." "Where have you been?" God, she was such a flirt. He didn't stand a chance. Yeah, I guess I haven't seen you since we moved, I guess." He was struggling to find the words, but his expression said everything. Archie was smitten. You must have started school here right after I graduated. You're 16 now, right? Uh-huh, going on 17. Marion here, just turned 17 a couple of weeks ago, she said, pointing her thumb back at me without turning her head. Meanwhile, I was torn between the desire to rip her head off and die right then and there from shame. Oh right, hi, Marion. Archie said, with a clumsy wave, finally acknowledging my existence. I don't remember you from school. Are you sisters? Wait, no. Of course not. Cousins? Of course he didn't remember me from school. We'd never said a word to each other. He lettered in football, and I hid in the library during lunch period. Why would we? Still, he wasn't one of the guys who tortured me. To me, he was more like God's greatest taunt, demonstrating what I was supposed to be, but would never actually become. Ella must have been so distracted by the hunky boy that she forgot what I was wearing, because her expression showed genuine surprise when she turned back to face me. The muscular hunk she was drooling over must have short-circuited her brain or something. She fumbled to find an answer to his question. Marion is, well, she's a family friend. Her and her mother have been living here for a while. She was in a really bad accident, so she's been stuck in bed for a while now. It's an exciting time, actually. Tomorrow, she's got one more doctor's appointment and she's finally free of that stupid bed. We'll probably have to tie her up just to get her back home tomorrow night. I couldn't believe it. She just went with the truth. The only thing she changed was my pronouns. Congratulations, Marion, Archie said, smiling politely, before immediately returning all of his attention to Ella. Can I call you, sometime? Yeah, let me find a pen and paper, she replied eagerly, while looking around the room. He just politely waved and said, no need. We've got it on your card at the shop. I'll ring this evening. Just don't call during dinner. Mother won't let us answer the phone then, she hurried to say, before he closed the door snugly behind him. I can't believe you. I shrieked as soon as the door latched. Why didn't you just say I was a visiting cousin or something? She waved her hand dismissively, saying, don't worry about it, Marion. We'll just tell him it was a prank later. He'll probably get a kick out of it. It's not like he's a giant asshole or anything. He's always been very sweet to me. To you, sure. I said, waving my arms around her like I was losing my mind. You're a pretty girl. I went to school with him for 2 years and he never even took the time to learn my name. To be fair, you never spoke to him either. You don't know how he would have treated you if you'd given him the chance. It'll be fine, I promise. Just calm down, okay? Ella took a seat on the bed again and gave me those same pleading eyes that always got her what she wanted. This time wasn't any different. Okay, fine, I said, taking a deep quivering breath. I need to get out of this stuff now though. I held up the mirror and started to reach for the ponytail, but Ella grabbed me by the wrist and pinned me down onto the bed. She straddled my torso and pinned my arms down with her knees. We were about the same size, but I'd spent the last year stuck in bed, so obviously she was in much better shape and had no qualms using that fact to her advantage. You have to wait for Mother and Nancy to see you. I wanted to be mad, but it was hard when she was being so silly about it. Seriously, I'll never stop tickling you if you mess up my hard work. I said, you wouldn't, and made the meanest face I could. Instead of being menacing, she found it extremely funny. She used one hand to hold my wrists together, and the other to start playfully poking at my ribs. No, stop. I squealed, thrashing away beneath her weight to no avail. It only took 30 seconds, and I was begging for mercy. Okay, you win, I sputtered. I was nearly out of breath when she finally relented. Promise you'll keep it all on till our moms get home, she commanded. She was brandishing her claws like the torture devices they were, so I felt inclined to agree. Fine, I promise. I'll wait till they get back. Just don't tickle me anymore, please, I said, with tears of laughter streaming down my cheeks. Okay, I won't. She got off of me, and turned like she was going to walk away, but in a flash turned back around, and tackled me to the bed again saying, after this one last time that is. Needless to say, she had to repair my hair after she had her fun with me. Her mom got home first, and gushed over my appearance. Magda was so ecstatic, she kept going on in Polish, cupping my cheeks in her hand, and kissing me on the forehead. Ella told me later she was saying something about how I looked so much like her little sister. When Magda finally calmed down, she cooked us both lunch. She was usually pretty affectionate with me, but it seemed like she was especially touchy-feely with me that day. Any excuse to kiss my head, or trap me in a squeezing embrace was taken. 6 in the evening came and passed, and my mom was still nowhere to be found. She was usually home by then, but we'd finished eating dinner, and we were halfway through the evening news before we heard the familiar click of her heels coming up the stairs. You would not believe the day I've had, she said, after opening the door. Facing away from us, she dropped her keys in the hutch by the door, and removed her gloves one finger at a time, while continuing, I've got good news and bad news. Which do you want to hear first? Instead of an answer, all she heard was the snickering of Magda and Ella, sitting on the sofa beside me. Mom turned to see what all the commotion was about, and that's when she noticed for the first time that her baby boy she left in a nightgown that morning was looking much more like her baby girl now. Well, what do we have here? She asked, smirking. I could tell she was trying to keep a straight face, but was clearly thoroughly amused. Ella decided to have some fun with me today, I said, blushing as red as my mother's lipstick. I can see that, she replied, scrutinizing my appearance with a fascinated expression. Should I be budgeting for a prom dress at the end of the school year? Absolutely not. I nearly shouted. I know, baby, I was just picking on you. She patted me on the cheek, and kissed me on the forehead in a way only a mom can do. Seriously though, you look wonderful. It's a hoot. I remember the overwhelming confusion I was experiencing well. The effusive praise of my family was in direct opposition to the voice of my father playing on repeat in my mind, calling me a sissy as he always did, with such venom in his voice. My heart was torn between pride and shame, and it was one of the most uncomfortable experiences I'd ever dealt with in my short 17 years. I quickly changed the subject, asking, you said you had good news and bad news. What's the good news? Mom took a deep breath in preparation and gleefully spouted, the 4 of us are to take a nice vacation for Christmas to sunny California, instead of being stuck here in this cold, wet popsicle. We're going to the newly opened Disneyland. That's amazing! Ella nearly screamed, jumping up and down with glee. Everyone's going to be so jealous. Everyone had seen the park on the news. It looked like a dream to visit. That's wonderful news, Magda said, smiling pleasantly, but ever the pragmatist. She added, we're going to have to go shopping before then. I'm going to need several new outfits before then. I better start saving now. What's the bad news? I asked, snapping everyone from their reverie. My mom took a seat next to me in bed, and placing her hand on my knee, said, I have a friend who's been working for the park since before they opened. I received a telegram from her this morning at work, and they're having some kind of costuming emergency. A costuming emergency? I said, incredulously. I didn't know such a thing could even exist. Oh yes, Mom replied, stroking my hair and running her fingers down the ponytail. I mean, emergency is a subjective term, but Mr. Disney seems to think so. He's not satisfied with some of the costumes a lot of the cast members wear. He wants new costumes made, precisely to his specifications, before next week. I've been invited to come assist. I'll be fairly compensated, and our entire family will get to go to their holiday event, all expenses paid. I checked with my stage manager, and he gave me the week off. Even if we didn't take the vacation, it would still be worth the effort. The checks from your brother have been extremely helpful, but I'd like to give him the ability to spend his own money on himself for once. I took a moment to process all the information, and then asked, "So, when do you have to leave?" That's the bad news. If I accept the job, I have to leave tonight. The flight leaves at 11. So, you won't be there tomorrow when I get the cast off? I won't, baby, but Magda and Ella will, and I'll be there in spirit. We'll go out and do something special when I get back. Besides, you won't want me cramping your style anyway. You'll hardly be here, I'm sure. Monday, you'll have to get registered for school on your own too, but you're nearly an adult. I trust you can manage. I promise, I'll call and let you know when I get there safely. With this job, we can afford the long distance. I was disappointed, but I knew my mother worked hard to support me, and I didn't want to make her feel bad. I slapped on the happiest face I could and said, "Okay, Mom, I understand. Go to California, and I'll see you when you get back." She hugged me tightly and said, "Thank you for being so understanding, Marion. Mothers dream of a child as wonderful as you, but I'm blessed to not have to." She kissed me on the cheek and locked eyes with me. I asked, "You don't think it's queer for me to be sitting here, wearing this outfit?" "It's certainly not what I expected to come home to, but I think you're being a good sport about it." I believed her. In retrospect, I probably could have come home dressed like a chicken, and she would have still loved me more than anything. Besides, Mary Martin is playing Peter Pan in our show, and she's in line to win a Tony for it this year. Clothes don't make you who you are, and they certainly don't stifle exceptionalism. You're quite exceptional, my little dove. Just then, the phone rang, and Ella answered it. Kowalski Ryan residence, oh hi. Yes, okay, we'd love to, okay, see you then, bye-bye. When she hung up, her smile was saccharine. Who was that? Her mom asked. Just a friend, Mother, Ella answered, knowing what her mom was actually asking. There's a group going dancing tomorrow night, and it was just an invite. Okay, fine, but you better be home by 11, Magda warned, then added, you should take Marion with you too. It'll be his first night out in a long time. Don't abandon him, Ella. I wouldn't dream of it, she said, wearing a Cheshire grin, and then patted me on the shoulder as she walked to her room. I couldn't shake an ominous feeling the rest of the night. My sentence was over, and I was finally free. The day I'd spent months waiting for had finally arrived, and I found myself stretched out across a cold, metal examination table. I was wearing a hospital gown, but it did little, if anything, to warm me while I shivered, alone in the quiet room. There was a soft knock on the door, followed by the doctor entering, and his nurse behind him. Marion, right? He asked, while flipping through my chart. Yes, sir. He set the clipboard down, and the nurse pulled the thin blanket I was covered with off of me, exposing the papier-mâché, crotchless shorts that had been the bane of my existence for the last year. He fit 2 fingers down the waist and said, "It looks like you've gained quite a bit of weight since you've been stuck in that thing. I'm guessing your mother's a good cook?" I smiled and replied, "The best, sir." He returned a warm smile and asked, "Are you ready to get this thing off?" "Definitely, sir." The nurse had just finished setting up the equipment, so the doctor flipped on the machine and set to task with the small, wheel-shaped saw. I was apprehensive when he started. Having a vibrating blade that close to your genitals would probably make anyone a little scared. My worries proved unfounded though, because if anything the sensation tickled. I giggled so hard that I unclenched my fist for the first time since they walked in. "I love your nail polish," the nurse teased when she noticed my crimson fingernails. "That's a cute color on you." My face flushed with shame, and my cheeks matched my nails perfectly. "Let me guess," the doctor said, clearly finding the whole situation humorous. "Your sister got a hold of you while you were stuck in bed." "Something like that," I replied, balling my fist again, and dreaming of the revenge Ella had coming. She could have said something last night about running out of polish remover, but she didn't say a word. "Don't be embarrassed," he said, trying to comfort me. "It happens much more often than you'd think." The doctor finished his 2 cuts and said, "Moment of truth." He lifted the top half of the cast off. I was expecting something, but it wasn't the foulest odor I'd ever had the displeasure of sniffing. I nearly vomited. "Don't be embarrassed about the smell either. That literally happens to everyone. I'll bet you'll be taking a nice long hot shower when you get home." I lifted my pelvis off the table, and they pulled the bottom of the cast from underneath me. The doctor examined my midsection and seemed satisfied with what he found. "So, the cast was there for a while, so you're going to see some impressions around your waist where the cast didn't leave room to expand. Don't worry about it. It's just like the weird heads newborn babies have. Just give it a little time, and you'll be back to normal. Just take it easy for a few more weeks, so we can be sure everything is behaving. I seriously doubt you want to find yourself back in a cast for any amount of time. No heavy lifting. No running. Walking is going to seem kind of foreign since you can actually move your thighs now, but you'll get the hang of it soon enough. It's like riding a bike. Any questions for me?" "No, sir. Thank you so much." It was the most joyous I'd felt in a long time. I was free, and I was loving it. They left the room, and I got up to get dressed. When I went to slide up my underwear, that's when I saw exactly what the doctor was talking about. My waist was still the slim 28 inches it was when I started, but beneath that, my hips, rear, and thighs had swollen to strange proportions. To me, it looked like my butt had been stung by 1,000 bees. Also, on top of where the cast was, I'd also put on some weight. It was the first time I didn't see the outline of my ribs through my skin. Out of curiosity, I stepped on the nearby scale by the door. I fidgeted with the weights until everything balanced out, and sure enough, I'd gained about 30 pounds. I was the heaviest I'd ever been in my life, not that I was large, but it was definitely new. My briefs were so tight that you could barely see the silhouette of my privates, which were now firmly pressed into my body. I'd definitely be exercising every day from then on. After my thorough appraisal of my frame, I slipped into my plaid button-down and my blue jeans. The jeans barely made it over my hips, but at my waist they still fit okay. I tucked in my shirt, and after collecting my shoes and socks, I stepped out into the lobby where Magda and Ella were waiting on the edge of their seats. As soon as she saw me, Magda leapt from her seat and showered me with affection and praises. I was up. I was walking under my own power, and on top of all that I was wearing pants. It's funny the things we take for granted, until they're gone. "Your mother can probably fix those when she gets back," she said, holding me at arm's length and examining me from head to toe. Magda pulled me back in for another tight hug. She nearly squozed the life out of me, but Ella came to my rescue. "Mom, you're going to break his ribs," and then we'll be stuck here even longer. I'm sure Marion is ready to get home and take a shower, she said, waving her hand in front of her nose. Ella never missed an opportunity to rib me. I said, yeah, that's probably a good idea. I know I'd appreciate it. You're right, Magda said, taking one last long look at me. I need to get to work anyway. Esther is a tyrant. You've heard me go on enough about what a nightmare she is. I had to beg to be here now, and I'm working extra shifts tomorrow morning to make up the time. I'm so proud of you though, Serdusco. It's been a hard road, but you made it. I can't wait to tell your mother all about it when she calls. We made the trip back to Williamsburg with the wheelchair folded up and stuffed in the back with Ella. I'd have been happy leaving it there, or setting it on fire even, but Magda was insistent that we find someone less fortunate that could use it. When we got home, she made Ella and I some lunch, and left us with stern instructions for our day. Marion, all of your suitcases and boxes are still packed up in your bedroom, so you'll need to get your room arranged to your liking. Ella, help him break down the bed and set it back up where it goes. I'm sure you don't need a reminder, but just in case, don't forget to take a shower. I know you both are planning to go out tonight, but just make sure your chores are done before you leave. I'm leaving $4 for you both to share. That should be enough for a trip to the barber shop, the train fare, dinner, and a little extra in case of an emergency. Ella, stay close to Marion, and if anything happens, don't hesitate to call me. Be back before 11, or you'll both be grounded. I'm not joking. 11. I probably won't see you till tomorrow night at the earliest, but don't break the rules. I'll know. Be good, children. She collected her cap, purse, and gloves, and kissed us on top of the head. I love you both. Have fun tonight. Ella, be good. After that, she was gone. Why is she always telling me to be good? Ella asked, dropping her sandwich back on the plate. Without missing a beat, I replied, because you're bad. Yeah, you're right, she said, smirking. Let's take care of the bed. We've got a lot to do today. Thanks, but I don't know if I'm going to go out with you guys tonight. I know your mother thinks I should, but your friends aren't really my friends. We can just tell her I went. We can figure it out later, she said dismissively. Let's do this now. I want to get it over with. I might have been slightly older, but it was obvious who was in charge. I finished my meal and placed my plate in the sink. I walked down the narrow hallway past the bathroom. I'd been in the tiny apartment for months at this point, and it was the first time I'd seen that part. The first room on the left was Ella's. It was a good size for a New York City bedroom. She had her walls decorated with collage art she'd made, and several paintings of flowers. Her white-framed twin bed was pushed into the back corner, across from her desk, and the floor was covered in various garments. Ella was never the most organized person. The next room on the left was the master bedroom. I peeked in to see the two twin beds our mothers slept in with the little brown nightstand between them. Everything had a place, but the room was still packed full, since it was occupied by two women in their late 30s instead of the husband and wife it was intended for. At the end of the hall was my room. All of my things were stacked up in the corner, waiting for me to sort them. It was pretty dusty, but it wasn't a bad room. Sure, I wouldn't have the TV at my disposal anymore, but it was worth it to finally have some privacy. I propped the door open and decided where I wanted my bed to go. Ella and I broke the bed down and clumsily slid it across the carpeted floors to its new home. After it was reassembled, I fitted it with new sheets and fell back into it, basking in the pleasure of having a space that was just my own. Okay, you need to start getting ready now, Ella said, pulling me back to reality. We've got a lot of work to do, if you're coming out tonight. I sniffed my armpit and said, "You're right, I need a shower, but I thought we already talked about this." "I don't want to go tonight." "But I need you to," she shouted, stamping her foot like a child. I sat up, perplexed. "Why do you need me to?" She lowered her eyes and mumbled something I couldn't understand. "I have no idea what you just said." "That's because it's not a group thing. It's a double date. You set me up on a date and didn't tell me?" "Who is it with?" She shrugged. "I don't know. One of Archie's friends." Of course this is about Archie. That guy is as dumb as a box of hammers. With a lustful expression, she said, "Yeah, but he's got plenty of other qualities to make up for it." I was definitely getting irritated. She was always doing things like that. Ever since we were kids, she would hatch all kinds of plans and schemes, assuming I was along for the ride, though never actually asking. I can count the number of times I was grounded on one hand, and every single one of those involved Ella somehow. I don't understand though. Why is Archie helping a girl get a date? Is something wrong with her? She mumbled another inaudible response. It then dawned on me exactly what she was planning. Absolutely not. "Please," she begged, with the same pout that usually plowed through my will. This was different though. She was asking a lot more than usual. "No. You can't seriously expect me to go on a date with a boy," I grimaced at the thought. "Please, it's just one time. Do it for me before you chop off all that hair." "No. Seriously, it's one date. We're going to Manhattan and watching Archie's friend's band play at some coffee shop in the village. They're taking us to a malt shop first, so you'll get a free meal out of it. You can keep all the extra money Mom left. Do it for me, please. No one will know besides you and me. I mean, you looked so pretty yesterday, and Archie had no idea. Imagine how good you'll look if you actually wore makeup." I did, in fact, start to imagine myself dolled up for a night on the town, but felt ashamed and shoved the thought back out as fast as it came in. "I said no, Ella. That's that. I haven't been out on a real date since you've been back, you know. I'm not saying it's your fault, but you are the reason. I've spent all my time here with you, taking care of you, and worrying about you, Marion. Have you felt lonely once, since all that stuff happened?" She was right. She had been there for me the entire time, and she didn't have to be. I hung my head off the foot of my bed and kicked my feet behind me, like a toddler throwing a temper tantrum. "I know, Ella, but you're asking a lot. I'm a boy. I don't know the first thing about being a girl on a date. If anybody finds out, that's it for me. I'll never be able to show my face outside again. I promise, no one will know. I'll be right there with you. I'll give you a crash course in feminine deportment before we leave. It shouldn't be that hard for you to pick up." "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked the question, but I already knew the answer. "Nothing, you're just smart. I'm sure you'll pick up on it quickly." I wouldn't normally ask this, but Archie insisted it be a double date. He made plans with this guy long before yesterday, and he didn't want to cancel on him, but he really wanted to bring me too. He just doesn't want to make that guy a third wheel. Archie assumed you'd be on board, because you've been cooped up for so long. Archie's a gentleman. This guy's probably one too. He's probably a little nerdy even, so he shouldn't get handsy. I need this, Marion. I'll owe you big time. What could you possibly offer that would square us up? Anything. A blank check. You can ask me to do anything anytime and I'll do it, no protest, no questions asked. Please, Marion. By the time I'm finished with you, not a soul would think you're a boy. You do such a good impression of me anyway. Just do that, but scale it back so you're not such a caricature, and no one will be the wiser. She sat on the bed beside me, and started stroking my hair, while I buried my face in my pillow. Pretty please, with sugar on top. I lifted my head, and turned to face her. She was pouting again, but this time I could see the smile she'd hidden behind it. She knew she'd already won. Okay, fine. I shouted, forcing myself back upright. You said, a blank check. I'm going to hold you to that. I offered my pinky, and she accepted. With our ritual complete, the contract was effectively signed. So, what do I have to do? Well, first things first, you stink. I know you were looking forward to a shower, but today, we're taking a bath instead. Ella hopped up from my bed and headed straight for the bathroom while I trailed behind her. She started running the bathwater and poured some perfumed liquid in with it. I thought it smelled wonderful at first. When I realized I was going to smell like that in a few minutes, that penetrating shame returned, and I hated myself for enjoying it. I'm going to get some things together, Ella said, pulling me from my thoughts. Get in the tub, and close the curtain till I return. I need to bring you some things, and I don't think either of us want me looking at your privates. She left the bathroom, and I stripped down. Before I got in the tub, I caught sight of my reflection in the full-length mirror that was on the back of the bathroom door. It wasn't the wasp waist of years past, but my midsection was very small, especially compared to the flesh around it. I took some comfort in the doctor's words earlier, so I wasn't too stressed about it. Still, my body had changed a lot since the previous year. I couldn't help but be concerned. It occurred to me that Ella wouldn't knock, so I hurried into the tub and pulled the curtain closed behind me. The water was so warm on my feet. From there, I lowered myself slowly, adjusting bit by bit to the temperature change until right before my privates were about to hit the water. I took a deep breath and took the plunge. Once I was fully submerged, I laid back into the curve of the tub and soaked it all in. This was the most pleasant thing I'd experienced in over a year. My bones warmed, and a relaxing sensation took over. When Ella returned, I heard her set some things on the toilet seat. Wash your face, and your body. You can get your hair wet, but don't wash it. Leave that to me, okay? Once you get out, I've got some things for you to wear on the commode. When you're decent, shout for me, and I'll come help you with everything else. She was already gone before I even had a chance to respond. I was fine with that. I let the warmth of the bath wash over me, and it was the most relaxed I'd been in months. My rear was a little tender pressed into the hard porcelain, but it was worth it. My skin started pruning up, so I quickly washed my face and my body, then stepped out of the draining tub. On the toilet seat, I found a pair of white satin panties and a fluffy blue dressing gown. Once I was covered, I called for Ella. She came back down the hallway from her room with her arms loaded. She dropped the mess into the bathroom sink and fished out her electric shaver. I didn't have much hair on my body, but there was fuzz under my armpits and my calves. That was gone with a few deft swipes. Next, she found her tweezers and started in on my eyebrows. The style of the time was thin lines that were highly arched. Some girls kept a more natural look, but apparently, I was not to be one of those girls. Ella had attacked my forehead with a righteous stinging fury. By the time she finished, I had the same delicate arches she did. We can fill them in with pencil until they grow back, she said, cutting off my protests before I could voice them. After she finished my epilation, we went to the kitchen, where she washed my hair in the sink. Mom had been washing my hair through most of my recovery. She didn't do half the job Ella did though. Ella scrubbed at my greasy locks with her soap and rinsed. She came back around for another rinse, but this time poured some lemon juice in it. She said it was to make sure all the soap rinsed out. Whatever the reason, I suddenly craved a nice tall glass of lemonade. When she was satisfied, she wrapped my hair in a towel and sent me back to the bathroom to powder my body to get rid of all the excess moisture. She had me finish off by coating my entire body in lotion and rubbing it in deep. From there, we went back to the kitchen table, and while listening to records, Ella parted my damp hair on the side and rolled it up in pin curls. Once finished, she tied a large chiffon hair scarf around the curlers to protect them, and then coated my face in a smelly green mask. I thought I'd finally have 5 minutes to myself, but I was sorely mistaken. Ella asked me, "Who's your favorite actor?" I answered, "James Dean." "Why?" "Because he's so cool and talented. He should have won the Oscar for East of Eden." "In fact." "Nope," she interjected, cutting me off. "He's dreamy. Let's try this again. Why is James Dean your favorite actor, Marion?" "Because he's dreamy?" "Are you asking me, or telling me?" "He's dreamy." "Okay, now say it like you mean it, and do it sweetly." I summoned my best Ella impersonation and imagined myself in James Dean's arms. I plastered a romantic expression on my face and tried one more time. "Because he's dreamy. He's the dreamiest fella in pictures right now. I'd do anything for a date with that hunk. To be fair, he was dreamy. Too bad about the tragedy not far around the corner. If only we'd known." "Wonderful, Marion," Ella said, praising my efforts. She was clapping her hands together with glee. "Would you like something to drink?" "Sure." I should have seen the trap coming. "No, that would be lovely." "Would you like something to drink, Marion?" "Why yes, Ella. That would be lovely." This went on for about an hour, and then I was allowed to wash my face. The mask had hardened, but with a little water, it came off without a trace, and my skin was as soft as a newborn baby's. I watched TV for an hour while Ella took her time in the bathroom. She joined me in the living room, with her hair tucked under a shower cap, and her face covered in the same mud mask I wore earlier. We finished an episode of The Adventures of Robin Hood, and then she returned to the bathroom to wash off her mask. It was time to get dressed. I stood in Ella's room, in front of her floor mirror, while she had me try on nearly every dress in her closet. She was going on and on about the pros and cons of every outfit. I know she did this kind of thing for herself all the time. Her room had always been a mess, ever since we were kids. The floor was filled with dolls, and Jacks when we were little. The only difference between Ella then and now is that she's moved on from tea parties to makeup. Otherwise, she was still the same feisty steamroller, who stopped at nothing to get what she wanted. She was a perfectionist from the day she was born. "What do you think of this outfit?" she asked. "I don't care, really," I replied. Truthfully, I liked the dress. It was a forest green, plaid number, nipped at the waist, with the fit and flare silhouette that had been popular since Christian Dior debuted the new look. I couldn't let her know that though. My fragile masculinity was at stake. I thought that maybe if I ignored the cracks, the problem would resolve itself. "Whatever you think is best," she said, of course, but her expression told a different story. Ella definitely didn't believe me. I don't think she wanted to embarrass me though, so she kept her mouth shut. She just said, "I figured I'd give you a choice. You're the one that's going to wear it after all." She unzipped the dress, and after I slipped out of it, she hung it up on her closet door. We know what you're wearing now, so I'll be able to get the rest of your outfit together. Are you ready to nip that waist? Wait, what? I had no clue what she was talking about. I'd never had an occasion to learn about women's underthings. I have a memory from when I was very young, the kind that sticks with you until you're old and withered. My father had recently returned from his tour in Japan. One day, my mother was setting her hair while I sat there watching her, enthralled by the ritual. Playfully, she asked if I wanted to try. I silently nodded my head yes, so she took one roller and wound up my short bangs and pinned it into place. I looked in the mirror and giggled at my reflection. My mom picked up a lipstick off the vanity and added a little color to my smile. We looked at each other in the mirror. You really do favor my side of the family. I didn't really understand gender expression at the time. All I knew was that this one time, I was allowed to do an adult thing. I rushed to the living room to show my father. When he saw my appearance, the man was so livid he crushed his beer can in his hands, spilling the liquid all over the rug. He grabbed me by the back of the neck and dragged me into the bathroom, and with a bar of soap in hand, he scrubbed my lips raw, screaming, "Boys don't do that," at me. I swallowed so much soap that I was sick for a few days. When he finished, he grabbed the curler and ripped it from my head, taking a small patch of hair with it. Done with me, he stormed into my parents' bedroom and slammed the door behind him. I sat on the floor, crying for what felt like hours, while I heard shouting and my mother's screams through the bedroom door. After that, we never spoke of it again. I never watched my mother get ready again. I never showed any interest in anything remotely considered feminine in front of my father again. None of that stopped him from regularly calling me a sissy. This was the day I got another look behind the curtain, and what I found was rough. Ella wrapped a waist cincher around my already narrow waist, and after looping all the little hooks through all the corresponding hoops, she pulled the laces tight. For a minute, I thought she was trying to cut me in half. Once she had the laces tied off, she slipped a white, satin bullet bra around my chest and had me slide my arms through the straps. The extra fat pushed up by the waist cincher tried to fill the undergarment, but still came up short. Ella stuffed the cups with some stockings from her dresser. In the mirror, I could see that I now had a proper hourglass figure. Ella said, "You can admire yourself later, Marion. We've got a lot of ground to cover, and less time. The more we procrastinate." I threw on the white, linen full slip that she'd set out of her bed, and followed her to her vanity, where she had me take a seat. "Are you ready for your makeup lesson? Can't you just do it?" I asked. I didn't think the feminine education was necessary. "It's just for tonight, right? It'll probably be faster if you just do it." "I'm sure it would, but you need to learn." She wrapped a towel around my shoulders and used a hair clip to fasten it behind my neck. "We're going to be out for several hours. Things happen. You eat. You smoke. You neck with some cute boy. Things happen, Marion. You'll have to repair it eventually, and I seriously doubt you'll want to find yourself in the ladies' room, looking like it's your first time there. I'm not going to be necking with anybody, Ella, let alone a cute boy." "I do see your point though. I guess I'm ready to learn, teach." "Thank you. We're going to keep it simple. You're more of a Grace Kelly than a Jane Mansfield anyway. First things first. Pick up that little box of powder foundation. There's a powder puff inside. Use that and coat your entire face and neck." I did as instructed. The process was simple enough, but I did learn that if you open your peepers at the wrong time, it can be quite painful. After I wiped away the tears from the burning eyes, we waited a moment for everything to calm down, and then returned to the task at hand. "Now, use that brown pencil and start filling in your eyebrows." Deadpan, I asked, "You spent all that time ripping out my eyebrows, and you want me to draw them back in?" "Yes, dummy. This time they're going to have some shape. When you draw them in, use small strokes, always in the direction the hair grows." I followed her instructions, this time without any painful incident. "Excellent, Marion. Perfect arches. Now, use that same pencil and trace the line of your upper eyelid." This was harder than I expected. Anytime I got anywhere close to my eye with the pencil, the lid would start reflexively blinking at rapid speeds. I dropped the pencil in frustration and shrugged at Ella. I had no idea what I was supposed to do. She picked the pencil back up and handed it to me. Almost every girl has to deal with this when she gets started. "I want you to hold that pencil as close as you can to your eye and don't move it. Just wait until you become acclimated and then try." It worked. A few short minutes later, I had a fine line drawn at the base of both sets of eyelashes. She had me repeat the same exercise with the eyelash curler. Those things look scary, but once I'd done it, I wasn't sure what had spooked me in the first place. It was incredibly easy. Much easier than the eyeliner, that's for sure. Mascara came next. I learned that the style was for girls our age to only wear top lash mascara, so that made it much easier for me. Through trial and error, I found a method that worked for me. I simply held the brush still, and then blinked my lashes through the bristles. The rest was downhill from there. A little bit of blush was brushed onto the apples of my cheeks, and blended back towards my ears. A final dusting of powder and a neutral, pink lipstick finished off the look. It wasn't perfect, but I'd certainly done a better job than a lot of girls in my grade would have. "Not bad, if I do say so myself," I boasted. "Yeah, you did great. Now, use that cold cream, go to the bathroom, and wash it all off." Ella didn't look the slightest bit impressed. "You're joking, right?" I cried, throwing my hands in the air. "I just spent an hour doing all this, and you want me to take it off." "Why?" "Because you spent an hour doing it, sweetheart. That would have taken me 10 minutes. Take it off, and do it again, but this time try not to ask for help. I'll be right beside you doing my own makeup if you have any questions, but you should try to do it on your own first." I did as instructed, and greatly improved my time and the quality on the second go. It still took me about 10 minutes longer than Ella, but she deemed it acceptable, so we moved on. She painted my nails to match my lips, but this time, did her own as well. I don't blame her. I wouldn't want smudged nail polish on a first date either. Ella dug into her closet and came back with gauzy, pink crinoline. I stepped into it through the waistband and started to fit it around my waist, only to be told that it wasn't correct, so I took it off and tried again. This time, I pulled it over my head, like a sweater, and slipped it down to my waist, over the skirt of my slip. The dress followed, and Ella helped me zip it up in the back. She wrapped a black, cinch belt around my waist, and fastened the golden buckle at the front, just beneath my false bosom. She dropped a pair of black ballet flats at my feet, and then, much to my surprise, also dropped her robe. We saw each other naked all the time when we were children, but things were different now. 2 things to be specific. I threw my hand over my eyes and asked, "Did you want me to leave the room?" "Why?" she nonchalantly responded. "It's just us girls here." "I wish you wouldn't say that. Get used to it. You're a girl tonight, Marion." It's time to start getting into character. I still averted my gaze until I heard the zip of her dress. Afterwards, she sat me down at the vanity and started removing the hair scarf and the dozens of bobby pins from my, now dry, hair. She pulled it tight in the back, the same as the day before, and tied it off with an elastic, but this time, she left the front curling down over my forehead. Ella started fishing through a drawer and pulled out a pair of shears. "What are you doing with those?" I asked, afraid of the response. "I'm going to cut your bangs. It's the style with ponytails like those now." "Okay, but what am I supposed to do when this is all over?" "You've got to get a haircut anyway. Before you go to the barber shop, I'll chop off a bunch more, and you can blame the look on your friend talking you into it." I couldn't argue with her logic, but I still felt uneasy while she sat there, snipping away. She finished, and then clipped the hairpiece over my own little nub, leaving it to curl smoothly down my back. She tied off the base with a black, felt ribbon, and started working on her own style. She pinned her blonde hair back on both sides, and let her page boy fall neatly behind her, curling under, while the front of her hair was swept to the side. She stood, and we both headed to the floor mirror to assess the full look. Ella was beautiful as always. She wore tasteful age-appropriate makeup, similar to mine. Her dress was quite classy, made of a pink linen. It fit tightly, but not too tight, comprised of a knee-length, straight skirt, a wide, white, scalloped, Bertha collar with matching cuffs on the short sleeves, and 3 buttons up the center of the bodice, with a large decorative flat bow right in the opening of the collar. She stepped into a pair of white, round-toed, low-heeled dress shoes, and clipped a pair of pearl-button earrings onto her lobes. She looked stunning. I was surprised to find that I was equally as attractive. The makeup did a lot to feminize my face, and combined with everything else, I made quite the pretty picture. The black stripes in the plaid were the same as the black flats, belt, and hairbow I wore. It had cap sleeves and a little, white, Peter Pan collar. Sure, it was quite girlish, but I could take it off whenever I wanted to. The hair, on the other hand, was a different story. The ponytail looked as clean and smooth as it had the previous day, but this time, in the front, there were short bangs, curled neatly, resting half an inch above my eyebrows. She clipped a white bead bracelet around my wrist, and proclaimed my outfit complete. We had about an hour left till the boys were supposed to arrive, so rather than standing around panicking, Ella had me practice smoothing my skirt and crinoline underneath when I sat. She thought my walk was too wide-legged, so she drilled me in that next. Walking with my knees together was hard, but I needed to build those muscles back up anyway, so it was good exercise as far as I was concerned. It was difficult holding myself upright and walking that way, and I found myself swinging my hips side to side and my rear behind me. I remember hoping my date wouldn't think I was fast because of it. Ella lectured about etiquette and the proper behavior expected of a lady out on the town. Chiefly, I was going to have to fight the urge to stand when a woman arrived or left. After a short quiz, Ella was satisfied I could handle myself and any unwanted advances. I even knew how to get into and out of a car, should we find ourselves in need of a taxi. I collected a black purse that Ella prepared for me, and spent the remainder of the time sitting on the sofa, clutching the straps tightly while my anxiety grew. A short while later, I was snapped out of my trance by a firm knock at our door. Ella placed her hand on my shoulder to steady me. She asked, "Are you ready?" I nodded my head. We took a deep breath together, and she swung open the door. On the other side, there were 2 gangly boys in slightly baggy suits. They put about as much effort into their appearance as any boy would at the time, but there was still a clumsiness about them, like teenagers usually have, ready to be an adult, but not quite there. "You girls look beautiful this evening," Archie said, shoving a handful of daffodils towards Ella. Gracefully, Ella said, "Why, thank you, Archie." She gave them a dainty sniff, and smiled pleasantly. The red-haired boy practically melted when she smiled at him. His buddy jabbed an elbow into his side, reminding him there were 2 other people in the room. "Oh, right." Archie turned his attention to me, for what was probably the first time. "Marion, this is Andy Barkley." "Andy, this is Marion, Andy offered me an equally disheveled bouquet. "These are for you," he said, a giant smile plastered across his face. "My friend has insulted you by not taking the time to learn your last name, and for that I apologize. Could he have been any more of a cornball?" He thought he was slick, and I'd melt in his arms then and there, I'm sure. In reality, he was about as suave as Jerry Lewis. Don't get me wrong, he was very attractive, but he didn't yet have the experience to back it up, and it was obvious. I was just happy he didn't shout, "Boy," and then punch me right in the face. I politely took the flowers from him and shyly whispered, "Thank you." Everyone was silent, expecting me to say anything else, but I was frozen in place. Ella came to my rescue. She took the flowers and said, "Let's get these into some water, Marion, and then we can go." Her name is Marion Ryan, by the way, Andy. You'll have to forgive her. It's her first date, and she's a little nervous. In total disbelief, Andy replied, "Your first date? I don't believe it, a girl as pretty as you. There's just no way." I realized I should probably say anything, so I went with a version of the truth. "Yeah, I was very sick for a little while, so I've been stuck in bed for about a year. Tonight's my first night out actually." He took my hand and kissed it gently. "Then I shall endeavor to make it the best possible." I would have thought I'd throw up right then and there, but I actually found it kind of cute, much the same way a child trying to impress you by doing a cartwheel is cute. Whatever the case, it was certainly disarming. I instantly relaxed. Ella returned from the kitchen and grabbed her purse. We left the apartment and made our way to the train station so we could catch the Brighton Beach line into Manhattan and start our journey to the East Village. We made it to the platform in the nick of time. The train arrived just as we reached the bottom of the stairs, and we only had to wait a moment, just for the doors to open. When I felt Andy place his hand on the small of my back to guide me into the car, my first instinct was to turn around and give him a piece of my mind. Fortunately, I remembered my appearance, and realized he was just being gentlemanly. We found 4 seats facing each other, and sat in an uncomfortable silence for the entire journey. 2 transfers later, and we'd arrived at our destination. At the time, the East Village was a hotbed for the growing counterculture of New York City. I'd never seen so many turtlenecks and goatees in my life. I couldn't believe it. Adult women were out on the town at night, unescorted by a man. "What's that smell?" I asked, as we walked past a coffee shop where several college students were smoking outside. Andy and Archie found this question very amusing. "That's Yankee Doodle," they said, giggling like children. Several years later, I found out what that meant when the hippies popularized marijuana, but at the time I was woefully ignorant. A few blocks down the road, we stopped in a cute malt shop for dinner and dessert. We took our seats at the bar, where the mirror along the back wall fortunately kept me aware of my presentation and the expected behavior that went along with it. Less fortunate though were the boys sitting between us. There wasn't a good way for me to use Ella as a security blanket, so I was on my own with my date. An older gentleman dressed entirely in white, wearing a paper cap, took our orders. Remembering my crash course, I let my date order for me. We both had cheeseburgers and fries, which, though delicious, I couldn't finish due to the restricting cinch wrapped around my midsection. Archie and Ella were having no problems finding things to talk about. He'd drone on and on about working for his parents, and she'd listen intently, never breaking eye contact. She'd ask the right questions, and giggle at the right time. It might have been her first date in a year, but she was definitely an expert. Archie was putty in her hands. My date, on the other hand, wasn't going quite as well. Andy, unlike most boys at the time, asked me what I was interested in. It was admirable, sure, but I didn't know how to answer any of his questions. I was supposed to be an average teenage girl. I didn't think I could say I liked science fiction and baseball, so I responded with dispassionate one-word answers like makeup and sewing. Bless him though, because he was undeterred. He'd ask a follow-up question and I would parrot something I'd heard Ella say before. In hindsight, I think Andy knew I wasn't being myself. That's probably why he kept grilling me. "What do you want to do when you finish school?" he asked, much to my surprise. I thought hard about what the typical girlish response would be. After a moment of hesitation, I said, "A mother, of course. Secretarial school possibly, as a stepping stone, but ultimately, I want to raise a family." "That's bull, Marion." A French fry almost fell out of my mouth. "I'm sorry." He seemed to realize his bluntness. Blushing, he elaborated. "Forgive me. I can be curt sometimes. I just mean, you don't strike me as the type. There's obviously more going on in your noggin than making babies. You can tell me the truth. What do you really want to do?" It was the first time anyone had ever asked me that question. As far back as I can remember, it was always assumed that I'd be working for Mr. Albertson, just like my father and brother. That probably wasn't an option anymore, regardless, but I never really wanted that life in the first place. I knew the honest answer, so I decided to just go for it. I want to be a librarian. I know it's not particularly glamorous, but I love books. If I could spend the rest of my life working with them in some capacity, that would be a life well spent. There must be something in books, things we can't imagine, to make a woman stay in a burning house. There must be something there. You don't stay for nothing, you could have knocked me over with a feather. Are you quoting Fahrenheit 451? I just read that for the 1,000th time last month. You're a Bradbury fan, I take it? I had been playing a role up to this point, but this is where we crossed a threshold. This boy genuinely had my interest. I came for the science fiction, but I stayed for the social commentary. Have you read Player Piano yet, by chance? I haven't had the occasion. Do you recommend it? I do. Personally, I'm for the advancement of technology. The story isn't necessarily against it either, but it brings up several good points about not losing respect for the human element of our society as it progresses. Good Lord, he actually had a brain. I guess I'd been expecting someone as sharp as a bowling ball, given that he was Archie's best friend. It was certainly a lesson in prejudice. I was so enraptured by our conversation that I didn't notice he ordered one milkshake when the counter worker came to collect our plates. I thought about saying something when the dessert arrived containing 2 straws, but decided against it. This boy was awkward, but quite fascinating and surprisingly eloquent. In spite of myself, I could have listened to Andy wax poetic for days. Plus, I was too old to be afraid of cooties, so I kept my mouth shut and took a sip of the milkshake, never breaking eye contact. After we finished our meal, the boys paid the tab, and we headed to a little coffee shop down the steps off the sidewalk. It was certainly dark and musty. There was a cloud of cigarette smoke permeating the place, as was common at the time, and the wallpaper was peeling, but I found it charming. We found seats towards the stage, where I had my first encounter with an actual chair. It shouldn't have been so difficult, but Andy and I kept reaching for it at the same time, then apologizing in sync. A subtle kick to the shin from Ella helped me realize I just needed to stand there, and let him be a gentleman. It also hurt, so I took my seat while shooting her a dirty look. The boys saw their friends standing in the corner with their instrument cases, so they went to say hello, leaving Ella and I to speak freely for a moment. With a smirk, Ella said, "You seem to be enjoying yourself." We finally found something to talk about, I shot back, furrowing my brow. I thought we were both going to die from the sheer awkwardness of it all, but he's actually very intelligent. I almost feel bad about tricking him like this. You're not tricking him. I snuck a listen to your conversation, and you were just being yourself. Maybe with a different coat of paint, yes, but from what I heard, all those thoughts and opinions were yours. It is surprising how long I've been able to keep up this girly voice. What girly voice would that be? She looked at me incredulously. That's your voice. You're using a select few different phrases from normal, but that's it really. You've never been one to moydur the English language with that thick Brooklyn accent your brother has. Whatever the case, I'm just glad you're having a good time. I really appreciate you doing this for me. A couple more hours, and you're free. Just then, the boys returned. They're going on a little later than they told us, Archie said, while trying to flag down the waitress. Andy explained, apparently, the show's running a little long. It shouldn't be too much longer, though. The waitress made her way to our table, where the boys ordered beers for themselves. Ella and I ordered coffee. We'd spend the remainder of the night watching various acts go on stage, with polite conversation between. I slogged through comedian after poet after folk music act, bored out of my mind, while Archie and Andy intermittently babbled about model airplanes. Ella was an old pro when it came to entertaining the interest of the men. I was not. I might have started pert and attentive, but the night had already gone on longer than I had hoped, and my boredom was obvious to anyone with 2 eyes and a brain. This might not have included Archie, but Andy was acutely aware and desperate to save the date. You know, Archie, the girls have listened to us go on about planes enough. Perhaps we should change the subject. Archie didn't miss a beat. He seemed to just be excited to have someone to talk to about anything. What about tomorrow? We're going to the Dodgers game. That's interesting, right? Andy started. I'm not sure the ladies would. But I quickly cut him off. You're going to the Dodgers game tomorrow night. That's amazing. I haven't been to a game since forever. Archie replied, yeah, Mr. Moneybags here's dad gets the lower deck box seats behind home plate on Saturdays sometimes. It's pretty swell. I'm so jealous. I nearly shouted, attracting attention from a few nearby tables. You know, you can come if you want to, Andy said, putting his hand on mine. I'd love to. I outright shouted this time. Ella asked, didn't you have something going on tomorrow, Marion? Nothing, why? I responded, only to feel a swift kick to my shin beneath the table. It was only then that it occurred to me exactly what I'd agreed to. I just thought I remembered you telling me you had to take care of something important. I froze for a moment and thought hard about my next few decisions. Any red-blooded American boy should have wanted out of this get-up as quickly as possible, but with the promise of watching the game from behind home plate at Ebbets Field, another day in skirts didn't sound so bad. Not that I can recall, Ella. Baseball tomorrow does sound swell, Archie. I'd love to come, if it's okay with Andy, of course. The glee was plastered on Andy's face, but he tried to play it cool. You're not the type of girl I'd peg for a baseball fan. Everyone in my family is. My brother actually plays in the minors down south. I listened to or watched every single Dodgers game when I was stuck in bed. I wouldn't miss one for the world. All right then. My dad, my brother Jimmy, and I play in our church league at the park near our place in Flatbush on Saturday mornings. Jimmy brings his girlfriend, and I usually bring Archie. We're spending the day together and finishing the afternoon at the game. You could meet us there tomorrow, if you'd like. Thanks, Andy. I squealed, leaning over the table and wrapping my arms around his neck. How about you, Ella? Archie asked, probably hoping for an equal level of enthusiasm. She replied, "Sure, Archie. That would be neat." Ella didn't really care about baseball, but she did care about me, and she definitely wanted to keep an eye on me. It probably didn't hurt that she wanted a second date with Archie also. I caught a look in her eye that said, "What are you doing?" but I chose to ignore it. Mercifully, the band we'd made this journey to see in the first place finally took to the stage. They weren't terrible, but in my opinion, if you've seen one coffee shop folk trio, you've seen them all, and I had already seen 3 perform that night. Still, I clapped politely. When they exited the stage, I noticed the time on the clock hanging on the wall. "We really need to get going, Ella," I said, trying to play it cool, but freaking out on the inside. It was 20 minutes till our curfew, and we were still hours from our beds. Ella, realizing the same thing, stood from her chair suddenly, causing the boys to shoot up after her. "Archie, we need to get going. My mother might very well kill us, and then neither of us will make it to the game tomorrow, let alone another date." The boys tossed a few bills on the table, and after collecting our purses, we rushed out and hurried to the subway station. On the ride back, Ella rested her head on Archie's shoulder while clutching his arm. Andy placed his hand on mine, and strangely, I let him. It wasn't hurting anything, and it obviously made him happy. 2 transfers later, and we were back in Brooklyn. We arrived at our building, where the boys tried to see us to the door, but Ella and I convinced them otherwise, more for their safety than for ours. I prayed with every step up the stairs. If Magda was waiting for us in the living room for some reason, then we have a lot more to explain than why we were late. Fortunately, nobody was there. We removed our shoes and tiptoed to our rooms. Just as I passed our parents' room, I saw the light come on under her door. We both hurried to our beds, where I threw the shoes under and jumped in, pulling the covers up over my head. I heard the door open behind me, and then close. After I heard the same from Ella's room, and then, much to my relief, I heard Magda's door close. I must have been holding my breath the entire time, because when the light switched back off, I exhaled with relief. It felt like we'd reached a finish line of some kind, but in reality, my adventure was just getting started.